Today's episode features another object that is near and dear to my heart. But unlike some of the other objects I've talked about on this podcast, this one's a bit funny, or perhaps a bit weird, or even downright creepy, depending on how you look at it. Speaking of looking at it, be sure to head over to Exhibit Smith's social media on Instagram or Facebook to see it for yourself. And please let me know if it makes you giggle or shudder or feel something in between. Have I piqued your interest yet? I hope so. My name is Lindsay Smith with Exhibit Smith. I'm rethinking the way we save our stuff. I help people interpret, preserve, and better understand the objects that make up our world. If you have a lot of stuff, it might feel overwhelming. But believe it or not, I truly believe that artifact and heirloom preservation can be both easy and fun. In fact, I've even developed a series of introductory level workshops on this topic and others just to prove my point. Learn more about them at exhibitsmith.com. Oh, and another thing, I am very excited to announce a new free downloadable resource that will help you better navigate the tricky path of downsizing. Our Downsizing 3 Questions to Ask worksheet is now available at both exhibitsmith.com and at hangerby.com. And speaking of downsizing, here we go again. In my Downsizing Heirlooms and Collectibles talk, I share the story of the aforementioned mysteriously creepy yet cute item that I promise I'll tell you all about in a minute. And when I talk about downsizing or helping people decide which treasured items they should and can keep and which they should and perhaps need to let go, I begin the process by asking 3 questions. 1, why did you acquire the item in the first place? 2, why do you still have it today? Or what's its current status in your home and in your heart? And 3, what are your goals for it in the future? I often use an example of a wedding dress in this scenario, as I've discussed previously in the podcast, because the first question is always an easy answer, and the others often are as well. But we're not talking about wedding dresses today. Today, I'm talking about something that's a little garish, a little silly, and a little bit of my childhood. Okay, here it goes. I'm talking about a piggy bank. A little piggy bank that reminds me of my grandfather. Today's story is going to have me lean into downsizing questions numbers 2 and 3. What is the item's present situation, and what are my future plans for it? And the answers might surprise you. This little bank is still in my care, even though it is not being used. It is not on display, and it most likely won't be on display in the future either. When I was a kid, I lived far from my grandparents. If you are a loyal podcast listener, thank you. And you may have heard my first episode about my grandma's plastic flowers that I still hold so near and dear to my heart, even though they've been gone almost 40 years. This, however, is a story about my other grandparents, or specifically my maternal grandfather. He also lived far away, out of state, and I also only saw him a couple times a year. But when we would visit, I knew that when I walked into the guest room where I always stayed, there would always be something on the dresser waiting for me. The little bank. It's a small bank made of plastic, maybe 6 or 7 inches tall, and whenever I'd arrive, it would be filled with all the change my grandpa had collected since my last visit. Remember change? Yeah, in the good old days. Anyway, when I'd walk into my guest room and put my bag on the bed, I would see this little bank, and even as a kid, I understood that it was special. He would get excited. Oh, your bank's waiting for you, he'd tell me on the phone as we geared up for the long drive to his house. It was always filled to the brim, and sure enough, I'd pick up the little bank, and it was pretty heavy, all things considered. And, more importantly, when I held it, I knew that my grandpa had been thinking about me during my time away. Now, I still have this bank, and I think it's probably one of the most important items that I have that connects me to my grandpa at a young age. So, is this bank on display in my home? I already told you it's not. Is the bank being used to hold my change? Change? What's that? No, it's not. And do I have plans in the future to display it or use it or even share it with loved ones? Probably not. Now, I will say that it isn't the most difficult thing to display, this small tabletop plastic bank. I'm not talking about keeping a car or a bedroom set or something that would require a lot of space and time and energy and maybe even money. I'm talking about a small item, one small item, that when I see it, I always think of my grandpa. As soon as I see it, I'm transported into that guest room that I've not seen for over 25 years. The tiny room with the twin bed pushed into the corner, squishing the vertical blinds that blocked out the blazing sun. The room that was brown, with accents of even more brown, with two large picture windows from which I could watch the shiny green June bugs congregate and hummingbirds drink from the hanging feeders. And it just makes me feel good. So, you might ask, if this item isn't large or cumbersome and I have such a personal affinity toward it, then why don't I have it out? Why aren't I sharing it with friends and family and helping to share the legacy of that story for the future? Well, unfortunately, as I keep hinting, the bank is rather garish. The bank is, in fact, here it comes, a bank shaped like a creepy clown. Yep, there it is. With the money going into a slot behind his shoulder blades, the clown sports unnecessarily tall red spiked hair surrounded by a stark white bald cap, and of course requisite gigantic shoes. He looks ridiculous. Even now, that little guy is a freaky sight to stumble across. And needless to say, the bank does not fit into the aesthetic of our home, and it's not exactly something I'd bring out for company. In fact, I don't even know if my kids have ever seen it, and they're just about the age I was when I was using the bank. But that's okay. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like to see this bozo-esque abomination for yourself, hop onto Exhibit Smith's socials at Instagram or Facebook and check it out. Oof. So honestly, when it comes to this item, it doesn't really matter to me whether I'm sharing it with the world or not. This bank is, as I said, probably the most important item that directly connects me to my grandpa and my memories of him while I was young. It's fine being stored away. I know where it is, and it's being kept in a stable storage environment. And it's small, it's easy to pack. So, to answer question 2, why do you still have it today? Or what is its current status in your home and in your heart? I'd answer that it is in storage, but definitely not forgotten. Now, perhaps it's because I'm the family archivist that I probably go through my storage bins more often than most people, whittling away things and reliving memories and whatnot. And to be honest, thinking of case studies I can use to help others via my podcast and talks, etc., content creator. So I do know exactly where the bank is. And every time I do stumble across it, I smile and it makes me feel good. Okay, but what about question 3? What are my future plans for the bank? This answer might surprise you. For an item like this, I don't necessarily expect my descendants to ever feel the connection to the bank as I do. The bank is not only not a part of their story, but it isn't really something that necessarily needs to be. It means a lot to me, but when crafting my own legacy and thinking about how I'm holding onto and sharing my grandfather's legacy, the bank is rather inconsequential. So its future plans will most likely not include me or even my family. Perhaps it'll eventually find a new owner who may or may not create their own memories with it. So, while other people, such as professional organizers, may implement self-imposed rules upon themselves or their clients by suggesting that if you haven't worn something in a year or used something in 3 years or in some other fabricated time frame, then you need to get rid of it. And now, in some applications, that's fantastic advice. And if it works for you, that's fantastic too. However, as a museum collections and heirlooms professional, of course I'm not going to suggest such far overreaching ideas. My little bank can stay in storage just fine. But you also need to think about how the item will be used not only in the present, but in the future. And right now, if it just makes you feel good, perhaps that might be enough. Of course, if everything makes you feel that way, or if something very large and burdensome gives you those same feels, you might benefit from asking yourself those 3 questions again and being a little harder on yourself this time. Why did you acquire it? Why do you still have it? And what are its future plans? But you will also want to make sure to ask yourself some more logistical questions, such as, do you have the space and time and resources available to properly care for all those things? Be painfully honest with your answers. If you can't take care of everything, focus on what you are able to manage and put your heart into that. Are there smaller items that feel as important as the larger ones? I mean, I wish I had the dresser the bank sat on for all those years. I wish I even had the entire bedroom set. But even if that had been an option for me, keeping the bank is a much more manageable and sustainable way to keep those memories alive. So the next time you're looking at your stuff, whether they're everyday items, family treasures, or something in between, I invite you to ask yourself these 3 questions and see if they help to bring you at least a little clarity as you navigate the sometimes difficult path toward downsizing. And be sure to download the brand new Downsizing 3 Questions to Ask resource sheet at my website to help you along. Along with the questions, there are some notes similar to those I've shared today to help you stay on track. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I invite you to subscribe to my podcast, tell everyone you know, and please help to share it online. Yes, I'm asking a lot, but I believe in you, and I could really use the downloads. And as always, you can see everything Exhibit Smith is up to at exhibitsmith.com. And while you're at it, be sure to stock up on those free downloads. Thank you so much for listening. I'm already looking forward to the next episode.